My wife whispered to my daughter, "Smile a little more. He tips better when you're nice." I heard it as I walked in with the groceries, wondering why she was wearing makeup for a family friend. I quietly sat down, pretending not to notice. Days later, my oldest son pulled me aside and said, "Dad, she's been taking her to his hotel every Saturday morning. Smile a little more. He tips better when you're nice." That's what I heard her say. I was halfway through the front door with 2 heavy bags of groceries when I caught it. My wife, Veronica, was standing in the hallway near the living room mirror, brushing a little extra blush onto our 11-year-old daughter's cheeks. It was a quiet moment, almost whispered, but the words stuck in my head like a sliver under skin. Smile a little more. He tips better when you're nice. There was no laughter after it. No wink. No joking tone. She said it like it was a script she knew too well. Like she'd said it before. I didn't ask anything then. I just carried the groceries into the kitchen, set them on the counter, and sat down in the dining room, heart pounding harder than I wanted to admit. I could still hear them rustling around in the hallway. Marissa, our daughter, asking if she could wear lip gloss. Veronica telling her to keep it subtle. They were getting ready to visit Uncle Ronnie, a man I'd always known as a casual family friend. I remember thinking, why would Marissa need to smile for him? Why would she need makeup? What the hell kind of family friend notices stuff like that? I tried to chalk it up to Veronica being weird, maybe trying to be polite, overcompensating for something. But it didn't sit right. Not for a second. And it got worse. A few days later, our son Frederick, he's 15, quiet but observant, waited until we were in the garage together to say something. He kept looking over his shoulder like he was afraid someone might hear. "Dad," he started. "I didn't know if I should tell you, but I think Mom's taking Marissa to that guy's hotel. Like, every Saturday." I didn't even know what to say. I think I just stood there, wrench in one hand, frozen. My voice was flat when I asked him what he meant. "I saw them get into his car once," he said. "They didn't see me, but it was early. She told you they were going to the library." I felt everything stop. I wasn't even angry in that moment, just numb. The kind of numb that comes when your body is waiting for your brain to catch up. A mix of fear, confusion, and that quiet whisper in the back of your mind that says, you already knew something was wrong. You just didn't want to admit it. And so I watched. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe I didn't want to believe it. But I started paying attention, noticing the patterns. The makeup, the perfume, the Saturday morning routines that suddenly started earlier than usual. The way Marissa stopped being excited about her weekends. Veronica had become distant over the last year. I figured it was the usual fatigue of married life. We'd been together 15 years. We had our routines, our fights, our quiet Sunday mornings, our shared bills and boring dinners. But there had always been a softness between us, an understanding that even when we were tired or frustrated, we were still in it together. Lately, though, that softness was gone. I felt more like a roommate than a partner. Her phone always seemed to be face down. She'd flinch when I walked in the room too quickly, or change tabs when she noticed me passing behind her. Her laughter with Ronald had always been a little too long, her compliments too effusive. But I told myself not to be insecure. Ronald was just a guy who helped us during the move. Just someone she knew from her old job in Schaumburg. But that morning with Frederick changed everything. And once that door opened in my mind, it didn't close again. So I did what I thought I'd never do. I followed them. I told Veronica I had errands. Left early. Waited in a parking lot not far from our house. Sure enough, just after 7:45 a.m., I saw our SUV pulling out of the driveway. I followed from a distance, my heart hammering in my chest like I was the one doing something wrong. They drove all the way to downtown Chicago, to a boutique hotel on Michigan Avenue. I watched as they pulled up to the valet. Ronald was already outside, waiting, smiling. And then I saw Marissa get out. She was wearing a dress Veronica had bought just 2 weeks ago, one I thought was too old for her, but Veronica insisted was just for special outings. The valet took the car. Ronald put his hand on Marissa's back and led her inside. Veronica followed, without looking back. I didn't move for a long time. I don't think I breathed. I wanted to believe that there was some explanation. Maybe Ronald was hosting some breakfast event. Maybe Marissa was helping with a family function. I wanted there to be an innocent reason, but there wasn't. And I think, deep down, I already knew that. I went home without confronting her. I had to think, to breathe, to understand what exactly I was looking at. Was this just cheating? Was it something worse? Why was Marissa involved? The following week, I started digging. I wasn't a tech-savvy guy, but I figured out how to check the GPS logs on the car. Every Saturday morning, same hotel. Texts between Veronica and Ronald were vague, but hinted at some sort of arrangement. And there were other receipts too, spa charges, cash withdrawals, clothing purchased online and shipped to a P.O. box I hadn't known about. The picture started forming slowly. Veronica had a second life, and I had no idea how far it went or how long it had been happening. But the worst part? It wasn't just betrayal between adults. It involved Marissa, my daughter. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I was allowed to think. My brain kept spinning. Is she pimping out our kid? Is it modeling? Some weird attention thing? Is this emotional grooming? Is this something else entirely? I was so scared of the answer that I didn't want to ask the question out loud. That night, I stayed up until dawn, sitting in the living room, every light off except the soft glow of the TV. I could hear the house creaking. Veronica was asleep upstairs. I could hear the faint hum of her white noise machine. The next morning, she came downstairs like everything was normal. Made coffee. Checked her emails. She looked at me with her usual indifferent smile, like we were just another married couple waking up to a normal Sunday. I couldn't look at her. Not yet. Instead, I told her I was taking the kids for the weekend, up to my brother's place in Wisconsin. She didn't argue, just said, "Tell them to bring jackets." She kissed Marissa goodbye like it was nothing. I remember looking at her and thinking, who the hell are you? We stayed at my brother's place for a few days. I wanted space, and I needed Frederick to feel safe enough to talk. He did. Slowly. He told me more about the times he'd overheard things. Conversations between Mom and Ronald. How Ronald would text, and Mom would delete the messages right after. How Marissa once came home with a new bracelet she said Uncle Ronnie had bought her. I wanted to vomit. I called a lawyer. I called child services. I wasn't going to make assumptions, but I wasn't going to sit on my hands either. Whatever was happening wasn't right. Even if it wasn't criminal, it was unethical. It was involving our daughter in something secretive, manipulative, and deeply inappropriate. When we returned to Chicago, I didn't go home. I called Veronica and told her to meet me at a cafe. Neutral ground. She arrived looking nervous, but still polished. I got straight to the point. I know about the hotel. Her smile didn't even crack at first. I know about the texts, the receipts, the cash, the outfits. I know. That's when she looked down. For a second. Then back at me. You don't understand, she said. My hands were clenched on the table. Make me understand, then. But she didn't. Not really. She said Ronald had been helping them out. That he was mentoring Marissa. That he had connections. She denied anything physical. Said it was just modeling, a few breakfasts, trying to help Marissa build confidence. But I could see the lies unraveling behind her eyes. I left that meeting with more questions than answers. Veronica was calm. Too calm. Like she'd rehearsed every line. I could see she was trying to frame it as some kind of innocent favor, like Ronald was just a wealthy benefactor doing the family a kindness. But none of it added up. Who takes a preteen girl to a downtown hotel every Saturday morning for confidence building? After that day, I stopped engaging directly with her. Everything became about documentation. I worked with my lawyer and contacted a therapist for both kids. I explained what I could to Frederick. He understood more than I wished he did, but Marissa was harder. I didn't want to plant ideas in her head. I didn't want to make her feel ashamed or scared or like she'd done anything wrong. Because she hadn't. She was a child, and the adults around her had failed her. The therapist agreed. She said Marissa had become unusually quiet, especially when discussing time with her mother. That she deflected or gave short answers. That she had a habit of watching people's faces while she talked, like she was trying to figure out what they wanted to hear. That part shattered me a little. Meanwhile, I kept digging. Ronald, as it turned out, wasn't just a friend from Veronica's old job. He was an ex-boyfriend. From before we'd even met. They'd reconnected on Facebook about 2 years ago, casually at first. She'd invited him to a few birthday parties, barbecue cookouts, that kind of thing. I remembered him being charming, overly so, but he'd always been respectful around me. He even complimented my grill slaughters and brought fancy wine nobody really liked. But he had money. A lot more than I did. And charm. And time, apparently. He ran some kind of consulting business. The kind where nobody really knows what you do, but you always seem to have reservations at the best restaurants. I started contacting people from Veronica's past. A few coworkers, some high school acquaintances. Slowly, I built a picture of Ronald I never knew. Not necessarily criminal, but manipulative. Charismatic. The kind of guy who always seemed to be orbiting someone else's life. Never grounded, but always there. And Veronica? She'd always liked attention. That wasn't new. But the depth of it, the need, the craving, was something I hadn't really seen until it started pulling our daughter in. After about 3 weeks of documenting everything, my lawyer recommended I push for emergency custody. He said we didn't need a smoking gun, just a consistent enough pattern to show that Veronica's behavior was putting the kids at emotional risk. I was hesitant, not because I didn't want to protect them, but because a part of me was still clinging to the hope that there was a version of the story where Veronica wasn't doing anything nefarious. That maybe she was just being stupid, naive, not evil. But that hope was fading, especially when Frederick found one of the gift boxes in Veronica's closet, tucked behind a pile of old sweaters. It was a jewelry box from a boutique store in the city with a handwritten note inside. To M, you shine brighter than any of them. Or that was it. I didn't even show Veronica the note. I scanned it, added it to the file, and moved forward with the custody petition. She reacted exactly how I expected. Denial, tears, accusations, threats. At one point, she called me at 3 a.m. sobbing. asking how I could think she'd ever hurt Marissa, telling me I was destroying our family over something I didn't understand. I told her the courts would decide what was appropriate. When I hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. The same kitchen where we'd shared morning coffees, birthday cupcakes, those chaotic weekday breakfasts with spilled milk and missing homework. The same kitchen where I'd once danced with her, barefoot on a Sunday, while the kids giggled from the hallway. It felt like someone else's house now. I didn't tell the kids everything. They knew something big was happening, but I tried to shield them from the uglier parts. Frederick was old enough to connect dots. Marissa just knew that Daddy was sad a lot, and Mommy wasn't staying at home anymore. The first court hearing was quiet and tense. Veronica showed up in a beige suit, with her hair tied up in a way I'd never seen before. Ronald wasn't there. Her lawyer kept things vague, painting her as a misunderstood mother and me as a bitter husband grasping at straws. But our documentation was solid. The judge ordered a temporary custody change pending further investigation. Veronica was allowed supervised visits, under the condition that Ronald was not present. She didn't fight it in court. Not directly, but the fire in her eyes said it all. She wasn't done. In the weeks that followed, she tried every emotional angle. Apologies, guilt trips, anger, even seduction. Once, an awkward, late-night attempt to flirt over a co-parenting email. I didn't respond. I wasn't interested in revenge at that point. I just wanted my kids safe. And I wanted peace. A life without secrets and whispered instructions about smiling more. But peace was still a long way off. Because Ronald didn't go away. I started noticing him again, on the street near our house. At the grocery store. He never approached. Never said a word. Just lingered. It was subtle, but deliberate. I told my lawyer. I filed a police report. They said there wasn't much they could do unless he made contact. He's not violating any restraining orders, they told me. Yet. So I started carrying pepper spray. I checked the locks twice at night. I installed cameras. I kept the kids close. I didn't want to scare them, but they could tell. Kids always can. One night, as we sat watching a movie, Marissa asked softly, "Is Mommy mad at us?" I didn't know what to say. "She's not mad at you," I told her. "She's just making some choices we don't understand right now." Frederick looked over at me, eyes hard. I understand them. I knew he did. I hadn't told him everything, but I think he knew enough. Maybe he always had. He was the first to speak up, after all. The first to break the silence. And that silence? It was almost broken completely. I was close to the truth. Closer than I'd ever been. But I still didn't know how deep the hole went. Or how many people might fall in when I finally exposed everything. The next few weeks were a slow, painful slog through court dates, counseling sessions, and the uneasy rhythm of co-parenting with someone I no longer recognized. I felt like I was living with a stranger's memories, watching over our kids while Veronica drifted further into whatever shadowy version of herself she'd become. The house still smelled like her perfume in certain corners, and I hated that I could still remember it so clearly. She'd send check-in messages, usually performative, like, "Hope the kids are eating well. Has Marissa done her reading? I told her she could borrow my blue sweater, by the way." Stuff like that. Like she was still trying to sound like a good mom, like nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, I had hired a private investigator to start looking into Ronald's background. At first, I wasn't sure if that crossed a line. I didn't want to become one of those paranoid ex-husbands obsessed with their replacement. But Ronald wasn't just a guy Veronica had moved on with. He was a grown man who had a direct line of influence over our daughter, and I had no way of knowing what his real intentions were. The P.I., a guy named Len, who looked like he belonged in a rusted-out truck more than behind a desk, was matter-of-fact and quiet. He didn't judge, didn't ask too many questions. Just nodded, took the manila folder of what I already had, and said, "Give me 2 weeks." In the meantime, I tried to hold things together for the kids. Marissa was still quiet. Not scared, but closed off. Like she was afraid that saying the wrong thing would make everything worse. Sometimes, she'd start a sentence, then change her mind. She'd say she missed her mom, but only after glancing at me like she needed permission. Frederick, on the other hand, was fully in protector mode. He'd sit at the dinner table with his arms crossed, watching Marissa like she was glass and the world was full of baseballs. He'd started sleeping with his bedroom door closed and locked, something he never used to do. At one point, I walked in and caught him reading through Illinois law on his phone, trying to understand custody rules. I didn't stop him. Instead, I sat down next to him on the edge of the bed and said, "You're allowed to be angry, Fred, but don't carry this alone." He just nodded. Then, after a minute, if I'd said something earlier. "No," I said, "this isn't on you." And it wasn't. It wasn't on either of them. But the weight of it still hung over our house like heavy snow. Quiet. Suffocating. Len called me 11 days later. Said he had something. We met at a diner in Des Plaines, the kind with chipped mugs and laminated menus. He slid a thin folder across the table and let me open it in silence. Inside were photos, printouts, and a short typed report. Ronald had a history, not of arrests, but of patterns. Relationships with single mothers, often with young daughters. Over the last 15 years, there were at least 4 women he'd gotten close to. Women who all had girls between the ages of 9 and 14. It was never enough for a charge. Nothing concrete. Just overlapping timelines, social media activity, and testimonial fragments Len had pulled from old friends, neighbors, a couple ex-employees from Ronald's so-called consulting firm. The man was a ghost with a polished smile and a string of carefully curated connections. He's careful, Len said. Knows how to stay just this side of the law. Doesn't leave fingerprints. But if you want my professional opinion, you're right to keep your daughter away from him. I felt a kind of nausea that had nothing to do with the half-eaten pancakes in front of me. It wasn't proof. Not legally. But it was enough. Enough to know that Veronica had either fallen under the spell of someone dangerous, or, worse, that she knew exactly who he was and didn't care. That night, I sat alone in the living room long after the kids had gone to bed. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. I didn't even bother with a glass. I kept thinking about the little things. The way Veronica used to hum while folding laundry. The inside jokes we had when the kids were younger. The time she cried after Frederick's kindergarten recital because he'd remembered every word. I used to love her so deeply it scared me. And now? Now I was afraid of her. Because if she knew, really knew, what kind of man Ronald was and still brought our daughter to him, then the woman I loved had died a long time ago. The next morning, I forwarded Len's report to my lawyer. He told me it strengthened our case. Not a guarantee, but it would raise eyebrows in court. We decided to push for a forensic evaluation, a psychological review of both parents, including interviews with the children. Veronica tried to block it, of course. Filed an objection through her attorney. Claimed it was emotionally damaging and an unnecessary escalation. But the judge approved it. And just like that, the cracks started to show. The evaluator came to our house first. Spent a few hours with me. Asked me about the history of our relationship, how the kids were adjusting, what I was hoping to achieve. I kept my answers steady. Honest. No dramatics. Just the truth, plain and simple. Then he interviewed Frederick. That part took longer. When it was Marissa's turn, I watched her disappear into the sunroom with him, holding her stuffed owl like it was a shield. She was in there for almost 40 minutes. When she came out, she didn't say anything. Just curled up on the couch and stared at the TV without turning it on. Later that evening, when I tucked her into bed, she whispered, "Did I say something bad?" "No," I said, smoothing her hair back. "You said what was in your heart. That's never bad." She nodded, barely, and turned over. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, trying not to imagine what she'd said. A week later, Veronica's visitation was temporarily suspended. The report had come back, sealed, but with a recommendation that she undergo further evaluation and that all contact with Ronald be formally restricted during the investigation. Veronica went ballistic. She showed up at the school unannounced one afternoon, trying to drop off a lunchbox she claimed Marissa had forgotten. The school called me immediately. By the time I got there, she was already gone, but the principal was shaken. We filed for a protective order the same day. Ronald, meanwhile, had gone quiet. I hadn't seen him near the house again. Either he got spooked or he was waiting. I wasn't sure which was worse. Frederick told me later he'd started carrying a pocket knife. Just in case, he said. That broke something in me. Because number 15-year-olds should feel like they need to protect their sister from their own mom's boyfriend. No father should ever have to wonder what his child might have experienced while he was still clinging to the idea that everything was probably fine. And yet, here we were. My lawyer warned me things might get uglier before they got better. Veronica's legal team had shifted tactics. Now they were painting me as overprotective, paranoid. They'd dug up old text messages, fights we'd had, moments where I'd snapped and said something I shouldn't have. They were trying to turn my fear into a weapon. But I wasn't backing down. Because when I looked at Marissa, her small, quiet frame curled under her blanket, her eyes too old for her age, I knew that this wasn't just about divorce or custody or court battles. This was about protecting innocence. And I was ready to burn the whole thing down before I let her lose another piece of it. It took months. Exhausting, emotionally draining, wallet-emptying months. Court hearings, therapist appointments, emails back and forth with the lawyers, evidence gathering, mediation sessions that went nowhere. The system was slow, so painfully slow. But bit by bit, truth started to win. Veronica was unraveling. Her carefully curated image couldn't survive the scrutiny. She missed a few supervised visits, claimed illness, then claimed work emergencies, then just didn't show up at all. The evaluator's second report confirmed what I already knew. She had no insight into the impact her choices had on Marissa and displayed a disturbing lack of boundaries when it came to her relationship with Ronald. Then Ronald made a mistake. It was subtle, stupid, one of those slip-ups that narcissists make because they think they're untouchable. He posted a photo on Instagram. It was him in a hotel lobby, captioned, "Power breakfast with my favorite girl." And there, barely visible in the corner, was Marissa. wearing the same blue sweater Veronica had packed for her one weekend a few months back. The one Veronica swore Marissa hadn't worn since last year. The timestamp on the post matched a Saturday that had previously been unverified on the custody timeline. That single post changed everything. My lawyer filed an emergency motion. We attached the photo, the PI's report, the prior psychological evaluation, and Marissa's new therapist's statement. She had finally opened up a little more during sessions, enough to describe how Ronald tells me how to act when we go places, and Mom says I should be extra nice, so he'll keep helping us. The judge ruled in our favor. Full custody. Sole decision-making authority. Veronica was granted 0 unsupervised visitation until she could complete 6 months of parenting classes, personal therapy, and undergo another evaluation. She'd also be prohibited from allowing any contact between the children and Ronald under court order. But that wasn't the revenge. The revenge was quiet. It was long, and it was very, very satisfying. You see, Veronica had spent so long painting herself as the perfect suburban mom, carefully managing her image on social media, at PTA meetings, at the private tennis club. She'd somehow weaseled her way into thanks to Ronald's generosity. Once word got out, once she lost custody and people saw that she wasn't even fighting for her children anymore, her world began to shrink. Her friends stopped calling. The invites stopped coming. Ronald's consulting business? Turns out one of the board members at the tennis club saw the PI report, quietly asked him to step away from a planned fundraiser. Then another business partner cut ties. Word spreads fast in Chicago's higher social circles, especially when children are involved. Within 2 months, Ronald's Instagram disappeared. His consulting website quietly went offline. His LinkedIn changed cities. He vanished. And Veronica? She tried to relocate, but she couldn't escape the internet. That one photo, the careless one, made the rounds. It was saved, screen capped, muted in tone, but damning. Suburban mom lets creepy ex hang with daughter at hotel. The kind of post that doesn't need to go viral to stick in people's memories. She sent a few letters. Emotional, self-pitying things. One of them actually asked if she could reconnect slowly with Marissa by sending her a birthday gift. Marissa didn't want it. She didn't even want to open the package. Frederick had taken on the role of protector so fiercely by now that he threatened to throw it in the river. I convinced him to just return it unopened. Meanwhile, the 3 of us, me, Frederick, and Marissa, built something that resembled peace. I switched to part-time for a while so I could be home more. We went to therapy together. We found little routines, Friday movie nights, Saturday pancakes, Sunday long walks. They were small things, but they mattered. Marissa started talking more, laughing, painting. Frederick started letting his guard down again. He joined his school's mock trial team. Said he was thinking about becoming a lawyer. A good one, he clarified. One who protects people. And me? I stopped drinking alone. I picked up my old hobby, woodworking. Made Marissa a bookshelf. Made Frederick a custom desk. Started fixing up the garage workshop I used to let Veronica fill with old holiday decorations. I even started seeing someone new, eventually. Slow, cautious, honest. Nothing like the beginning with Veronica. And that's what made it feel right. The final piece of revenge? It came one crisp afternoon when I got a letter in the mail. From Veronica. Certified, signed. She was requesting permission to move out of state. Said she wanted a fresh start. I didn't respond right away. I waited. Then, through my lawyer, I signed off on it, with conditions. She could go, but she would legally relinquish any future claims to custody. That was the deal. She took it, and that was it. No screaming, no drama, no closure speech. Just papers signed and filed. And a woman who once thought she was untouchable walking away from the very children she used to dress up to impress another man. In the end, she got what she thought she wanted. And I got what she never thought I would fight for. My kids, my peace, my life back. And that, to me, was the most satisfying kind of revenge. Quiet, permanent,